Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Shovel Knight King of Cards. In the last week we explored our first Hall of Justice, playing a lot of that card game in the process, and now time for the Backyard Lab. Time for us to get a new sub-weapon.
Psst, over here. Sire, it's me. Thanks for dropping by for the test. I finished up our secret device. But the materials aren't free. Remember, I need merit mails to pay your suppliers.
In here is one of my favorite sub-weapons in the game, the Rat Bombardier. Release a rat with a safety bomb attached. While it's running, press again to reverse its direction.
The design of my safety bomb shields the rats from harm. Can you reach far into the course? And, by the way, don't shoulder bash in this cave. There are still a few kinks in the motion sensors. Could end badly.
So the Rat Bombardier, when you release it, the rat just runs forward until it hits a wall. You can reverse its direction at any point in time by pressing the button again. The important thing to me personally is the size of the explosion and the length of it, because it's so large they can hit a lot of enemies very easily, but it's long enough that it can actively deal 2 to maybe, I think, 3 hits in some cases against bosses and mini-bosses, making it a go-to for me in a lot of those cases. The only awkward thing is, because of the arc it goes at when you throw it, you can't really use it to super rely on with a lot of bosses that are very airborne a lot of the time. Although you can at least use, say, a dash jump or a twirling jump to at least get some extra air beforehand and maybe try and lead into that. Using it to reverse direction is a little bit awkward. That's a feature that I think isn't the most needed, but you can do it if you want to. Though notably, this game doesn't really have a sub-weapon that's like a go-to boss killer for me, or at least one I use more than anything else outside of one for survivability's sake. There's no, say, Chaos Sphere from Shovel of Hope, there's no Dread Talent or things like that, no Phase Locket. The sub-weapons in this are still useful, but they are a lot more actively spread in their use in a way that is honestly appreciated, because it means they're always going to get some amount of use here and again. I just wish there was one I really gravitated more towards a little more handily, because that's how I like to play these kind of games, but due to the moveset that we have, it's awkward enough where that's not exactly the case. Oh god, tight circumstances with King Knight, scary. With that said, none of the sub-weapon introduction stages are too terribly long.
The Rat Bombardier worked! Thanks to your field test, King Knight will be ready for production in no time. Yes, splendid. Why not come aboard my royal airship then and enjoy a well-deserved glimpse of my domain? After all this research, I could sure use some fresh air. Lead the way, sire.
What's really handy about a lot of these sub-weapon stages is that they do a lot to introduce use cases for the weapon rather than just let you experiment with it so you can see where it can really come in handy. With that said, depending on how you play, that's where the sub-weapon's weaknesses might come into play and make you not want to use them too much. With that said, a secondary impact of finishing a stage like that is that the NPC in question actively joins you on the exit ring and becomes a denizen of the glide wing, making them now an optional justice opponent should you want to go for 100% in that, which guess what we're going to do. But also, while we're here, I want to go get the other engineer upgrade we can get at this point. This one makes it so that if you're near any gold, be it the standard gems or anything up all the way to the top, and you're spinning, it'll get pulled into you. It has a wider spread than you'd think, but it's not absurdly wide. It's like maybe a 3 or 4 tile radius at most.
The progress is going well. It's not easy to estimate material costs, but it's getting there. The cost will be 2,500 gold to lay the foundation. What? Don't you want a portrait? Memento mori, King Knight. Paintings outlast memories.
We'll be actively investing in him in a moment.
Look who is up here, my brother. We're reunited. What a lovely ride, sire. Oh, it looks like my justice cards will come in handy.
Plus, every NPC you do that for will actively give you 400 gold, more or less. And like I mentioned, every single justice match moving forward is going to be sped up just for the sake of time. Largely, the cards that are of NPCs directly are better cards than the usual fluff cards you can get through Chester or things like that of enemies in stages. But that's not always going to be the case because they actively have such a big curve on the power of cards as you go through that what's an NPC card early on will probably still be worse than a card near endgame. Now, notably, your route choices here can actively really matter because some stages are harder or longer or have longer or shorter paths to get to the main boss of a world in question like King Pridemore. But you do have to keep in mind the random movements of mini-bosses like this one.
Hey, nice armor, bud. But beware, this is a private training spot. You're interrupting some private training.
King Knight needs no training. I'm already well on my way to defeating the Joustus judges. When I do, I'll take the Joustus crown and the title of King of Cards.
Whoa, a fight with judges in it. And if you beat them, you get to take their title.
Now, wait just a moment. The title isn't...
And if you're King Knight, then that means beating you would make me a king and a knight.
That's not exactly how it...
King Knight, this bout is for the title. Titles. I prepare to get wrecked.
Baz in this playthrough starts off with a lot of the familiar tricks. He'll wave his whip around him in a circle above his head to prevent you from pogoing on top of him. He'll whip around and try to swing around like a Belmont and all that. He can cause shockwaves on the ground. But it's towards the latter half or so of the health he really breaks out a new trick where he's gonna bounce around the screen like a ball. And what's really dangerous about that is he can electrify himself with lightning while he's doing so. And become completely invincible to damage during that and become just a walking hitbox. It's not a hard fight per se, but if you're rushing too much into it with the low health you have at the start of the game, it's very easy to take a hit right when he's about to get electrified, and thus you just take a dumb hit along the way. I like the fight overall quite a bit, though. One optional mini-boss down, several to go. Defeating Baz actively unlocks something in specific, but I don't do that for a couple of minutes still because I go for the next level not thinking about it. Time for our first level in the Lich Yard aesthetic, the Sunken Town. This being our first dive into the Lich Yard aesthetic on the whole, this level focuses on the sinking platforms you might remember from this stage in the other campaigns, where if you're on something it might not necessarily fall, but if you and another enemy are, it will. And what's dangerous about that in this campaign is because King Knight has relatively limited mid-air mobility, at least until we get a specific sub-weapon down the line that can help with that, you really gotta prioritize actively taking out the threat in question. Otherwise, you're probably gonna end up in the water and thus take a death. Panicking can help a little bit with that here and again, but if you're not careful, this is a very early level that's very easy to take a lot of deaths in. I think on my first playthrough, I died in King of Cards more than the other playthroughs combined. If only because I got really hasty about a lot of jumps. Though, one piece of advice that's very good to learn very early on is you don't necessarily need to jump to make it to the next platform. If you are on equal footing with the platform and just shoulder charge ahead, you'll charge over a bottomless pit or a gap in the platform and end up at the same altitude on the other side, about 3 or 4 tiles away. Using that advice can actively get you through a surprising amount of very tight situations, but it's very easy to overlook the fact you can do that. On top of that, like with a lot of the other platformers that I've done over the years, patience will go a long way, but it's very easy to be rushed or panicked in the Shovel Knight campaigns just because of how they'll horde enemies at you or where collectibles are compared to everything else. In that regard, I really do appreciate how Shovel Knight is hard but fair with its level design, where very often will you take a death and feel cheated, per se. There's the occasional one, like I'd say more often commonly actually in this campaign than the others, but that largely comes down to either I mismade a jump or I got a little too aggressive about something. Reminds me a little bit of Dark Souls in that regard, having played Bloodborne, a Dark Souls, and a Lies of P now, which that's a genre I did not expect to enjoy whatsoever, but here we are. Now, I'm trying to remember the exacts of this. I want to say King of Cards is the only of the main 4 Shovel Knight campaigns I played directly at the launch of it. Because Shovel of Hope, I was a couple of months late to the party on, if only because I was in high school and didn't really have any kind of income at the time, so I kind of had to wait for allowance to build up or things like that. And I had other priorities, more likely, too. I want to say Plague Knight's campaign, same deal, roughly. I just was focused on other things, so I kind of waited on it, especially because it looked to me like it was the same campaign, just a different character, even if it has a lot of cool stuff to it itself. Spectre Knight's campaign, I got to quickish, but not immediate. I think it was like a month later, if only because, again, I was distracted with other things. I distinctly remember booting this up day one. If only because I knew that it was coming out, I had the income, I had cleared out my backlog of other things that I really cared about. And I remember walking away from this campaign impressed with some things and being very split about a lot of others. And a lot of that, I think, did come down to... I do think they kind of over-focus on Joustus for 100% in this. It's a neat minigame, but I don't think it can carry as much as the game as they want it to. But also, I really just didn't gel too much with how King Knight felt when I first played the game. But I think a lot of that is because I tried to play it like it was a Castlevania or a Mega Man like you can with a lot of the other campaigns. You need to approach this as a radically different genre platformer. And once you do that, it starts to become much easier to get through. Okay, Ectoplasm Chasm. This place's gimmick is the purple sludge on the ground. While you're on it, you can't directly jump. If you need air, you need to either shoulder charge off a cliff or shoulder charge into a wall or enemy near the muck to get into the twirling jump state. Using this, you can then actively get higher ground in the case you need to. This stage, I really didn't like on my first playthrough, but again, I was probably just rushing it. This is probably one of my favorite levels in the first third or so of the game nowadays. Now, something I should note, because money is of course one of the big things in this game, you can, like the prior campaigns, destroy the checkpoints in any given stage to get some extra cash. I really don't recommend doing that on a first run. I'd recommend if you want to break all the checkpoints to try and get the achievement tied to that. That you wait until you've cleared a stage and then go back into it so you know the level design. But I should note, because of this game's level structure, where every one of the levels from the main game and campaigns are split into 3 smaller levels with more distinct focuses, the levels usually at most only have 1 checkpoint, somewhere about the middle of it. Some have 2, but they're rare. Usually the ones that have 2 are locked to being like the end of area boss fight stages. So like when we eventually get to King Pridemore, his stage is going to have 2 checkpoints. And learning that pacing can also do a lot for how you approach the stages when it comes to aggression and trying to rush through it. Because if you realize you haven't seen the checkpoint yet, but it feels like it's been a long level, you might want to take things a little more slowly. But if you've seen the checkpoint, you can maybe be a little more rambunctious. Just make sure that whenever you die, you actually go back to, you know, collect the money you drop. Which there is a very specific ability I have yet to get that I could get by now that will help with that, namely back at the Joustus Hall even. But we'll get that in a few moments. I just had other things I would rather have done with my money at that point. Now you may have noticed, I went a hidden route earlier and it played a sound when we got here, and now we have a red exit ring. You might be wondering what's with that. A pretty good chunk of levels here in King of Cards have alternate exits. And in order to reach certain other levels in the game, you actively need to find them and explore unlockable sections of the map. In fact, in order to get 100% in the game, you need to get every single exit technically, because there's even a distinct achievement for unlocking every route on the world map. The alternate exits aren't usually overly well hidden. Usually just some pretty good sharp eyes can spot it, but they go a long way to make the levels feel like they have a bit more to them. Alright, what's our next limerick? Ahem. Liches love amulets, this much is true, but jewelers are eager to bid them adieu. When selling's one masterworks brings people health, one tends to start stacking up stock on the shelf. You know, between the limericks and other dialogue, I do think the King of Cards campaign is the best showing for the Bard character, but it's also largely because he's not just a glorified sound test anymore. I really like all the personality that the people on the Glidewing get as you go throughout the campaign. Speaking of which, though, it's time for me to spend some money to actually upgrade the painting. How exorbitant! In a way, I respect your craven demands. Indeed, get while the getting's good. But now, notably, Baz is here.
Whoa, you play Joustus too? I'm so into it. Joustus, pushing people around, blowing stuff up. Joustus rules. I got arrows for days, buddy. Full deck. Think you can step to this?
Whenever you defeat an optional boss, they'll become a random spawn at this table here on the Glidewing, and thus we can get some more cards. Worth noting though, Baz's card is the first one we've seen with a specialty icon. In specific, there on the bottom left of it is the slam icon. What that means is when it gets placed down, it jumps up and down, pushing any cards next to it an extra tile away from it. And if you use that to push into a card to begin with, you can in effect push cards 2 tiles away from you. That is incredibly useful. With that said, Baz is also a really good card to start because his 1 strength arrow on all 4 directions means he's pretty limited in what enemies can do to him at this point in the game. With that said, it's time for us to head back into Ectoplasm Chasm because we only have one of the 2 exits here, and well, for 100% you need both. Worth noting, the way I'm going to handle any level that has 2 exits is that I go for the alternate exit first, pretty much universally, and then just jump cut back to where the split point is and move on from there. Worth noting, though, you'll notice whenever I go back to an alternate exit split that my money increases. Whenever you revisit a level, all the money in the game, in the level rather, has completely respawned, so you can use that as well to also farm for money in the case you want to, for mystery packs, for Joustus cards, or things like that. In fact, later on in the LP, when I go for the rest of the Joustus cards I don't have yet, because I do that, I just spam one of the last level's first half for the alternate exit, because you can get upwards of 5,000 gold per at that point. Very effective, honestly. So here in this level, we also start seeing the soul fire that we saw in the main Spectre Knight levels in the other campaigns. Like that, when you dash through it, it does go out, but it restores itself after a moment. So it is a hazard, but it's one you can deal with in a pretty succinct manner as long as you're good about attacking into it. Although in that regard, out of the 4 key playable knights, because all the other ones are technically playable through Showdown and soon Shovel of Hope DX, King Knight has the easiest way of dealing with the Soul Fire, if only because his main attack also works as a form of ground traversal, so you have plenty of ways around it. Now, if there is one thing I will say about coming into this playthrough if you went right in from the other ones, it can be kind of easy to overlook what you can actively charge into and all that. Especially if you're coming from, say, specifically Plague or Shovel Knight's campaign, where walls are more an obstacle than they are a part of the platforming. Spectre Knight less so, just because he can do the wall climb, but even then you're using that more for a wall jump. Helps that, in general, you do a lot more platforming over instant death using the twirl jump and King Knight than in any of the other campaigns really combined, except for, again, maybe Spectre Knight, just because. Time for our next sub-weapon level. Welcome to the Duelist's Grave. Halt! There's danger ahead. A magic most foul has bewitched my trusty dueling glove. I cannot wear it. The glove simply falls through my hand. Perhaps you'd equip it instead? Sure. For 6 mirror medals, we get the dueling glove. Attack in succession with quick slaps. This is an okay sub-weapon, but I like it more for standard enemies than I do boss fights. Let's make haste, and shoulder bash not, lest we meet our untimely demise. I get the feeling you've already met your... never mind. See you shortly! So the dueling glove, you do a quick 1-2-3 combo with the glove that you can use to either attack enemies, dig through dirt blocks, or dig up dirt mounds. The animation is incredibly fast, especially if you're good about spamming the buttons, so you can do a lot of damage very quickly. But due to how bosses tend to feel in this game, if you're going to use it on a boss, I'd recommend doing it on one of the roaming bosses like Baz that are on the world map rather than any of the key boss fights at the end of an area for reasons. On top of that, it's very easy to get overzealous with your swipes with it and take some really dumb hits, so be careful with it. In the right hands, it can be a very good tool, but it's very easy to just take some really silly hits. But mind you, it's very easy to do that in Shovel Knight to begin with, and especially as King Knight, just because he feels so much tankier in his control than Shovel Knight, Spectre Knight, and Plague Knight. If only because, again, the shoulder dash is so rigid in its distance normally, barring the roll. I think a good way to summarize it is, if you look at Shovel, Plague, and Spectre Knight's campaigns as varying degrees of action platformers, King Knight's the only action puzzle platformer over the set, just because of how much more tricksy they get about placing money, the collectibles, enemies, and all that, to deal with his more rigid moveset. And honestly, approaching it with that mentality can really help you with your survivability, I find. We've survived! The Glidewing awaits, and I'll be able to pursue the Joustus Crown and find spirits. That sounds like my own... Wait, what? How do you know about the Glidewing? Well, I'm the Joustus champion they've chosen, and I aim to become King of Cards with the help of her crew. How curiously bizarre. Come with me, would you? And thus we've also recruited another NPC to the Glidewing. How is he holding on to me? I will admit, though, I'm not sure what causes what's about to happen. I'm not sure if its stage is cleared or how close you are to the King Pridemore boss fight, because hello, Mother! Mother, what are you doing here?
Sugar Plum, here you are. I grabbed one of your little rat ropes and suddenly I was whisked up here.
Your dear mother was just telling us all about the many virtues of King Pridemore.
I just love King Pridemore. I read in King's Weekly that he was a real stickler for the rules.
Mom? Hush! You know you're not to disturb my quests. Stay out of my thing! Without rules, one can't be much of a ruler. Perhaps your mother's insight could help guide our quests.
Oh, what a thrill, dearies. To fly through the sky and perhaps even catch a glimpse of a king.
This is nonsense! Hogwash!
Mother, say nothing to my servants!
So now that our mother's on the glide, we can actually get more health items from her, as well as the vigor items I talked about earlier.
What a grand galley. Finally some space to maneuver. I can create some dishes here that'll really give you vigor. Sweetie, have you brought some coin? I'd love to cook for you.
With that said, the vigor increasing pies actively cost merit medals rather than gold, and you might want to save your merit medals in some cases to get certain sub-weapons as they get more and more expensive. Merit medals are ones you need to think about what you use a little more freely than your gold, if only because the amount of things that you can buy with merit medals are a little sparser. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 4, we're going to continue tearing through the first chunk of the game before inevitably getting closer to our first main boss fight. See you guys then.